Jesus was often, of course, traveling around teaching and preaching the message of the kingdom. And he was also going around, though, healing sicknesses, performing miracles and signs in that way, and casting out demons, all of which to show the people who he is, to show them, to witness, to testify that he is indeed the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God. And Jesus also was, trying to teach and train his disciples to also be able to go around and teach and preach. And at times, Jesus did, through the Holy Spirit, enable the disciples to be able to, heal and cast out demons and such things. So Jesus was trying to instill faith in his disciples. He was trying to build faith in the people's hearts as well. But it was not always the easiest of tasks. The faith that God is looking for in us was not always readily there as it should be, which even today there's a lesson to be learned in our own faith. But I want to look at today in Mark chapter 9 as we continue in the Gospel of Mark, a time where, Jesus, there were times that, if you will, Jesus showed some frustration, some whatever you want to call it, with really just trying to get the people. Jesus was doing so many things, powerful things, to really build faith in the people. But again, there were times that they just didn't really have the faith they should have had. And sometimes that was frustrating to Jesus. That was, saddening, or, again, whatever you want to call it. Jesus shows that frustration, and he challenges the people to further faith. We see that today in Mark chapter 9, after Jesus comes down from the mountain, when we had just seen him transfigured there on the mountain, and he had spoken to Elijah and Moses, and Peter and James and John were there, and they all come down from the mountain. And when they finally get back in verse 14, they were then told that when Jesus came back to the disciples, he saw a great multitude around them, and the scribes were disputing with them. So Jesus walks onto the scene with his disciples arguing or disputing with the scribes. And immediately when they saw Jesus, all the people were greatly amazed, and running to him, they greeted him. Of course, many people were following Jesus, wanting to be with Jesus. Jesus often had crowds of people around him, coming after him, following him. And so Jesus then asked the scribes in verse 16, "What are you discussing with them?" Then one of the crowd answered and said, "Teacher, I brought you my son who has a mute spirit. And wherever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth and gnashes his teeth, and he becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not." So Jesus comes to find out the situation, really, at least what was kind of going on, was this guy brought his son who had a demon, a mute spirit, he says, very troubling, very hard on the son, seizing him, throwing him down, gnashing teeth, foaming at the mouth, all of these things. So this man brings his son to the disciples to cast this demon out, and maybe they've done some before, cast out demons before. Again, Jesus did, with the Holy Spirit, enable them to do that at times. But this time, says they couldn't. But notice Jesus' response here in verse 19. Jesus answered him and said, "O faithless generation, Or, O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long will I bear with you or put up with you? Bring him to me. I think here what we see is, again, Jesus somewhat frustrated that there is a lack of faith, there is a lack of belief among the people, maybe even among his own disciples. Just that after all that Jesus has done, has been doing, was continuing to do, and yet it was still a matter of there being a lack of faith, a lack of unbelief in Jesus and who he is, and what was possible through Jesus, through God, through the Spirit. And so he talks about, faithless, unbelieving generation. How long am I going to be here? How long am I going to bear with you? How long am I going to be here to try to get you to have faith? And so he calls the son to come to him, to bring the son to him. So then they brought him, the boy, they brought the boy to Jesus. And when the boy saw Jesus, immediately the Spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. So Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. And often he has thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us, the man says. It's been happening since childhood. It's been very bad. It's been life-threatening. And the man says, if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Jesus' response to the man then was, if you can believe. Or some versions word it, as if Jesus kind of exclaims, if you can. Like, that was the man's question of Jesus was, if you can do anything. And Jesus was like, if you can, of course I can. But however we look at it, Jesus is basically saying, well, if you can believe and know that I can, because all things are possible to the one who believes. And I love and I am humbled by the response then of this father in verse 24. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe. Lord, I believe. But notice what else he says. He says, help my unbelief. Wow. Talk about a heart of faith, but of humility. And a one where this man says, I do believe, but maybe my belief and faith isn't enough. Maybe it's not where it should be. Help my unbelief. If there is any unbelief in my heart, help me. And when Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more. Then the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him, and it became as one dead, so that many said, he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast it out? So Jesus said to them, this kind can come out by nothing but prayer, and some versions say, and fasting. Prayer and fasting. And a whole lot of faith and belief. So really what we see here, a couple things. First and foremost, we see an amazing miracle of Jesus in that he cast out this demon. Jesus, the Son of God, Messiah, Christ on earth, having authority over the demons, casting them out. We see that done by Jesus. But then in all of this, we see a reminder of our own faith. We look at Jesus' response to this man originally and to the people, to the disciples. O faithless, unbelieving generation, how long will I be with you? What about us today? How would Jesus describe us? Where is our faith? How much faith do we have? Are we believing? Are we faith? Are we full of faith? Something to think about. Where is our faith? How great is our faith? Because then I am humbled by this man's response later when Jesus had said, if you believe, all things are possible. And the Father cried out, saying, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And I feel that myself. He goes, yeah, I believe and I have faith, but is my faith really strong enough? How much do I believe? And are there some ways in which maybe my faith is lacking? Maybe I don't have as much faith as I think I do, or as much faith as I should. And so I am encouraged by this man to pray to God today, Lord, I believe, but if there is any unbelief in me, help me, Lord. Please help me. Please help my unbelief, my doubts, my fears, my worries, my times of weakness. Help me overcome that in faith. And I am encouraged by that. And to know that all things are possible with God. To truly continue to grow in that faith and believe that with God, all things are possible if He so chooses, in us doing His will. And let His will be done. But I got to have faith in God. And if my faith is lacking, I need to pray to God, Lord, help my unbelief. What would Jesus say to me? What would Jesus say to you? Sometimes I know it's easy for us to read this and, look at the disciples, look at the people, and then we kind of shake our heads and maybe laugh or maybe get frustrated with Jesus, or along with Jesus, being frustrated at the people and the disciples and those who lack faith. But we got to reflect on ourselves today. What about us? Where's our faith? Where's our belief? On a daily basis. Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. Let's continue to work on that and continue to grow in faith in Jesus. All things are possible with God. And we got to believe in Him. God bless.